Let me read to you a passage from the 11th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 16 to 19. It's the Gospel for Friday of the second week of Advent. St. Matthew writes, Jesus said, "To what can I compare this generation? They are like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others, 'We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her actions." That's from Matthew chapter 11, verses 16 to 19. What does this suggest to us? Well, one of the intriguing features, to say the least, of Christ's almost 3 years with the 12 is his relationship with the one who would betray him. The Gospel of St. John suggests that certain ones of the 12 attached themselves to him as his disciples even before his ministry had begun in a public sense, such as Andrew, Simon, John, Philip and Bartholomew. They knew he was the Messiah soon after his baptism, as we see in John chapter 1 verses 40 to 51. At least some accompanied him on his return to Galilee after his baptism and were present at the wedding feast of Cana when he changed the water into wine. Others of the 12 were among those disciples who came into contact with our Lord later, some of whom persevered in their discipleship while others did not. We know, by the way, 2 of those who had been with our Lord from early in his public ministry by name, Justus and Matthias. They remained faithful to our Lord throughout, and Matthias became a member of the 12 after the Ascension as a replacement of Judas, as we read in Acts chapter 1 verses 21 to 26. There were those who were not faithful. For instance, many of our Lord's disciples left him at his declaration of the doctrine of the Eucharist in Capernaum. New disciples joined him too. For instance, the blind man Bartimaeus followed our Lord along the road after his cure, and the chief tax collector Zacchaeus became a true disciple, for our Lord said that salvation had come to him. Our Lord even gained a disciple while carrying his cross to Calvary. I refer to Simon of Cyrene, whose 2 sons, Alexander and Rufus, were known in the later Christian community, as we read in Mark chapter 15 verse 21. That having been said, at a certain point in his public ministry our Lord gathered his disciples and selected 12, whom he called apostles, envoys, ambassadors, as we read in Luke verses 14 to 16. They were to be envoys of the king. Among them, mysteriously, was Judas, who would betray him. Now, St. John tells us that Jesus, and I quote, knew what was in man. John chapter 2 verses 24 to 25. So he knew what was in each of his apostles, and we must therefore conclude that Judas not only had a true vocation, but plenty of promise. He was selected ahead of many other disciples, including Matthias and Justus. We read that our Lord sent the 12 out on mission ahead of him to preach and to work miracles, and this they did, reporting to him on their return. Judas would have experienced the power of Jesus' name in what he did on mission. But our Lord would have seen, and with tremendous concern, a change going on in the heart of his chosen friend. And chosen friend he was. Our Lord addressed Judas as friend in the Garden of Gethsemane when he arrived for the betrayal, as we read in Matthew chapter 26 verse 50. So serious was the change in Judas' heart that at the end of our Lord's discourse at Capernaum, announcing the doctrine of the Eucharist, at which he lost many of his disciples, our Lord told the 12 that though he had chosen them, one of them was a devil. John chapter 6 verse 70. St. John tells us that our Lord was speaking specifically of Judas. Perhaps our Lord's awesome, though oblique, statement was meant as a solemn warning to Judas of the terrible course his heart was taking. However, our Lord did not expel his friend from his company. Even though he, Jesus, was capable of dramatically blunt words and actions. For instance, he unhesitatingly and sharply rebuked the leaders of the people, and he physically expelled the sellers and money changers from the temple. But we do not read of this vigorous and open action in respect to Judas. Even at the very last, just a couple of hours before the betrayal itself, our Lord does not haul Judas to book in front of them all. He warns of the betrayal in general terms, and warns Judas himself briefly but privately. It is obvious that our Lord at no point had brought Judas's false position to light, because the disciples could not guess who the betrayer was when mention of a betrayal was made at the Last Supper. What then was our Lord doing? What was he about? We may presume that our Lord was doing all that he could, and all that was best. Discreetly, silently, our Lord was working on the heart of his friend, his chosen friend, taking the best and most effective course for a change of heart, the course that only he would know was best. Our Lord would have left no stone unturned to bring about in Judas the change that was so necessary, but all to no avail. We are reminded of God's words to his people in the prophet Isaiah. What more could I have done that I have not done? Isaiah chapter 5 verse 4. I have dwelt on the case of Judas and our Lord's doubtlessly constant efforts for him as an example of the point in our gospel today that I read earlier, Matthew chapter 11 verse 16 to 19. John came doing one thing, and to no avail. The Son of Man came doing another, and to no avail. That's what our Lord says in the Gospel. God is the good shepherd, ever pursuing the stray. But we have been granted the gift of free choice, and we have it in our power to refuse the living God himself, to our peril. There is nothing God has not done nor would not do to save us from damnation. Let us appreciate our power to choose him, and let us make that choice. All for Jesus then.